So, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to everyone, and welcome to the YouTube platform of Chamber for Service Industry, that is GS Motivator. And as you know that under Feast here, we have developed one forum of educators, skill providers of tourism, hospitality, events, research and entrepreneurship with powered by Digital Inspirational Lab. And in this particular webinar series, this is our efforts, and we believe in introducing, bringing, getting close, and getting an in-depth information, latest information, and the trends prevailing in this particular broader category of service industry called as hospitality, tourism, and aviation, of course. Not to forget events as well. So in this particular series today, we have brought one gentleman who is the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Aman Malhotra for Kerten Hospitality. And he's going to speak, he's going to tell us about hospitality financial aspects. So what exactly this is, how important this is for the hospitality industry and for a hotel group, such kind of a firm. Let's go to him and directly ask him and get to know him and his work and in detail about the topic as well. So just just put your hands together to welcome Mr. Aman Malhotra ji. Sir, a very good evening to you, and Chamber for Service Industry and our entire team welcomed you.
Thank you so very much, Chitra. It's a pleasure being here and getting an opportunity to share the knowledge and experience that I've had in hospitality. So my career, just to give a brief, spans well over 15 years in the industry, where I've held major roles across different hotel chains, including a few Indian hotel chains, including ITC and Oberoi's, before I actually got into Marriott, and then I moved out of India. I worked in different markets besides India. I worked in the Southeast Asian region. I have worked in the Middle Eastern region, and that's where I am right now. So currently, I head the finance department for a company called Kerten Hospitality. We're into lifestyle hospitality, and we're into a service office space. We're into a gelato brand that we're operating. We're into F&B concepts. So it's a mixed use company that is very popular in this part of the world. So the prime objective that I want to achieve today is I want to bring a few basics of the financial aspects of hospitality. I remember when I started off my career, people used to ask me, I'm a chartered accountant by profession, and people used to ask me that, if you're a chartered accountant, what are you doing in the hospitality? So from that point, where people were curious that what would a finance person do in hospitality, which is purely a service industry, to today, as we speak, that finance has actually become one of the most important pillars of hospitality. And in fact, when we talk about stakeholders, when we talk about partnering with the CEOs, the COOs, the CFOs actually play a very key role. The finance, same goes to the hospitality in terms of the hotel operations, that the director of finance actually ends up playing a very key role in the operations. So without taking too much time, I think I'll probably start off with the presentation. If there are any questions, we can address those questions as we go along or after the presentation.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for your introduction, sir. And this is great to know that from being a chartered accountant, you entered into the hospitality field. This is wonderful. And this gives a new kind of a idea for all the youngsters, those who are looking for a different kind of a job. So thanks for that perspective also. We can see your slide now.
All right. So I think I'll begin with the first identifying that, why do people invest in hospitality? Obviously, there are multiple reasons for which people invest in hotels or related business. Hospitality is a very wide sector. It includes from hotels to restaurants, to the aviation, to the tour business, travel business. Right now, there are so many aspects of hospitality that have opened up, and that's primarily because the young Indian has started traveling. So uh, earlier, if you go back in history, for us, holidays would mean either religious tourism, where we would go to a place that is close to us in terms of religion, or we would go to our relatives' place. Now things have changed, and people are venturing out. So the dynamics of hospitality have changed completely over the last 10 to 15 years. So the main reason why people would invest in hospitality, obviously the first reason comes is return on investment, and that's true for any business. Whenever there is somebody who invests in any kind of business, and hospitality being no exception, the investor actually needs a return on investment. And generally what we have seen is that hospitality, if run well, would give you a very smart return on investment. The other thing is capital appreciation. Generally, when you look at the investment psyche of Indians, we generally invest in land. We generally invest in real estate with an understanding or with an aspiration that the asset would appreciate and we'll start getting more value out of our asset. And generally, hotels are placed in places where where it's a prime spot, and that's why the capital appreciation goes further ahead. And that's the second objective with which people invest in hotels or hospitality. The other one is brand creation, and this is so much apt in the current scenario. Like, we're surrounded by startups. There is a fresh idea that comes in, and I think ever since I've come out of India, the one brand that everybody talks about in terms of the startup world is Oyo. It's been a rage in terms of how a small venture that was created with a fresh idea, with a novel idea, turned out to be such a big startup. And now if you see, there is Zostel that has come in, which kind of gives you the concept of hostels, but a bit comfortable in niche places. You've got Saffron Stays. There are just so many startups that are building up around the hospitality, and that's another objective with which people generally invest in hospitality. Diversification of investment portfolio is another reason. There are many companies that have their core business, but then even want to diversify and venture into something else. One classic case that we see is one of the prime branded chains that we have in India, ITC Hotels, which was actually mainly into tobacco and related business, but they also venture into hospitality. And this is something that always attracts everybody. So that's why people generally tend to diversify their portfolio and get into investment in hospitality and related business. Growth potential. This is an industry which has just started off. Like I said, that our travel habits are changing, especially as Indians, our travel habits are changing. And with the population of 1.4 billion, just imagine the potential has yet not been even tapped to the extent of 1%. So the more people start traveling, the more people start getting into those experiences, those experiential stays. It just gives you that kind of a growth potential, and that's another reason why people invest in hospitality for a faster growth. And then potential captive consumption. We have a lot of companies, and when you look at the P&Ls or profit and loss of those companies, one of the major expenses, and this is true for many industry, one major expense that sits on their P&L is travel. And there are a lot of companies where if you have a repetitive business, what they would probably want to do is invest in a hotel, invest in something where their staff can stay whenever they're traveling. So that also gives an idea of investment to a few companies which want to capture their own captive consumption. Next, I would like to speak about how do we generally invest in hospitality. Where does the money come from? Obviously, the first, but this is more at a smaller scale, where you would self-fund. So if you're having ample funds, or if you're having surplus funds and you want to invest it in a business, then one of the source of that investment can actually be, or one of the avenue of that investment can actually be hospitality. If you're self-funding, unless you come from a big family offices, or you have a company backing, obviously self-funding can even be for a smaller asset of, say, around 10 rooms, 15 rooms, and then obviously you can grow from there. Then project financing. This is also very popular, where you pitch in with some part of your investment, and the other part of the investment is funded by either a bank, a lending institution, or these days even the government is really supporting hospitality, considering that it's a real employment generator. What we generally say in hospitality is that for every one direct employment in hotels, there are 9 other jobs that are created. So that's why it's something that government really focuses on. So project financing is another source of or avenue of funding. Asset conversion. Asset conversion is again typical in smaller and niche kind of products, where you have an asset already and you want to convert it into a hotel, a homestay, or an experiential stay. So we are all familiar with concepts like Airbnb right now, and they are very popular even in India. That people who have their own houses, or if you have more than one house, or if you have a stay option which is niche, either with a wonderful view or comes with experiential stays, so you convert that into a stay option. So that's the other way of initiating or starting off your business in hospitality. Pool funding. Pool funding would be primarily where you get together with a few other people who are interested in investing in hospitality. You pool the funds, you create a corpus, and with that corpus, you invest in a hospitality asset. And then asset contribution. This is also typical of hospitality, where there are people who have expertise of running or operating or opening a hotel, and there's another set of people who own a land. So when you break down the investment that is required for hospitality, especially in tier 1 or tier 2 cities, is the cost of the land, and that becomes the major portion of your investment when you start off. And unfortunately, this is required at the first stage of your investment. Whenever you start off a hotel project, the first thing that you would of course need is land. So this is needed at a very initial stage. So generally what you end up doing with an asset contribution is that your asset is your expertise to open, run, and operate a hotel, while there's another individual or another company that owns a piece of land, who would then contribute that piece of land either on lease term or as a capital contribution, and then you would build up a hotel. This is the other concept that I wanted to touch upon, and sustainability. Sustainability and hospitality, they go hand in hand together, but there has always been questions, especially related to industries which are close to hospitality, including like I said, that aviation, where people generally question that, does the hospitality actually think about sustainability? You would have seen that a lot of hotels put a lot of effort in anything that impacts sustainability, that impacts ESG, that impacts the society in general. But at the end of the day, it's a business. So when we're looking at a business, the decision on investing in sustainability, we all know that the moment you go green, there is a cost to going green, right? If we talk about hotels, for example, if you want laundry chemicals, basic example, when you buy laundry chemicals, you have the choice of buying cheaper laundry chemicals, but then which have got a lot of chemicals where they impact the environment in general. But then you also have an option of choosing better chemicals which do not harm the environment to that extent. But obviously it comes at a cost. The same for equipments. Then when you invest equipments in your projects, there are times when you have to take a call that whether you invest a larger amount but for a better future. So whenever you are struck with decisions like these, what are the factors that you seek? So one of the factors is, again, return on investment. So whenever the hotel owners, they invest, whether you're running it yourself or you're giving it to a third party to manage, the first thing that you would look at is that if I'm investing money in that, besides the sustainability, is also bringing a return on my investment. And the classic example for that is LEDs. We came from the CFL era to now LEDs, and there are a lot of hotels, especially the old ones, which were still running on the CFL. But when they started seeing the advantages of LEDs, generally the ballpark figure that we take is around 6 months. So within a period of around 6 months, if you're investing in LEDs, the amount of electricity that you will save, you will be able to recover your investment. And that's what people look at. That's what hotel owners look at, because it gives them an immediate return. But then there are also other investment which may not be that fast in returning your amount that you have invested. But then the other question that comes in is that you also have to give back to the society. So then you factor based on that. If you're creating employment, if you're creating, another classic thing, like for example, a simple thing as when you're producing something in your kitchens, you have an option of importing goods, you have an option of bringing goods from the tier A, tier one cities, or the other option is to go as local as possible, because the more local you go, the lesser would be the transport distance, and that's where you contribute. So there are so many ways for hospitality to really save cost and at the same time be green as well. The other thing is, this is a constraint that we generally face, that at the time of investment, when the project is starting, we generally are constrained by the amount that we invest. And like I said, that every time you have to think green, every time you invest in technology, like even in our homes, when we look at buying an air conditioner, we have air conditioner that might be having 2-star rating, 3-star rating, 4-star, 5-star, right? The more we go on the star rating, the more expensive it would become. An AC of 5-star would have a much higher cost than an AC with a 2-star rating. But then the moment you install it and we start getting the electricity bill, it starts getting a return back for you. But at the project stage, generally hotels end up being constrained by the funding, and that's where that also plays in the decision making on the amount that you invest in sustainable products. Another factor that is generally debated in hospitality is OPEX versus CAPEX. Whenever you're investing money in technology where you end up saving cost, then from a hotel owner, and this is very relevant, quite relevant in the scenario where you are not managing your hotel, you're just constructing your hotel and then you're giving it to somebody else to manage. So generally in those cases, the debate comes in that, whether I should invest as a capital expenditure on these technologies, or should I bear a higher operating cost? So that's where you trade off. But like I said, that at the end of the day, the factor that you consider is that whether the reduction in OPEX eventually manages to recover the CAPEX that you have done for such investments. And then expense factors. If it's a major expense, like for example, electricity is a major expense in hospitality. After payroll, generally, the second highest expense in hospitality is utilities. So anything to do with utilities, if it ends up saving you cost by investing money, generally hotels are interested in making that investment. And then lack of regulations is something that we have right now. There's no clear-cut direction in terms of what you should do. Like for example, even if you talk about LEDs, at this stage there's no regulation that hotels should only have LEDs. Whereas if those kind of regulations come, then you will be bound to run through the sustainable options rather than looking at something that costs you less at the stage one, but then has a higher recurring cost. Then Indian hospitality. So obviously Indian hospitality had a major setback like any other industry, like any other country in terms of the performance with COVID. We all know, we all have gone through those times, and we really hope and we really wish that something like that never happens again. But we've seen recovery. I mean, 2020 is where we had. So now what has happened is that after the pandemic, now we are almost 2 to 3 years beyond the peak of the pandemic. The industry has been recovering. And now if you see, like in 2023, the average occupancies that we saw in branded sector was around 66.1%. And if you see, that's actually the second highest in the decade. So that gives you an indication on how well we have recovered post-COVID. So the industry has actually shown a lot of resilience, a lot of hope has been given to us with this recovery. So second highest, and it's very close to the highest number that we had in the last decade. And if you look at the average rate has also jumped up to 6,869, and that's the highest that we have seen in 10 years. So that is all translating into the profitability, that is all translating into higher revenues for the hotel chains. Uh, if you look at the RevPAR growth, this is the index. So I'm not sure if all the audience that we have are well versed with the hotel terminology. RevPAR is the benchmark or the parameter that we consider for reviewing the performance of a hotel. It is revenue per available room. So this, in simple terms, would help you understand that how much revenue have you generated based on your total inventory. So there might be hotels which really charge a very high rate, but if they do not really have a high occupancy, then obviously the revenues would be low. Contrary to that, you might have hotels which have a very low rate, but they do very high occupancy. Again, they won't be generating as much revenue. So a perfect blend of this, or an indication that we take, is RevPAR, where you blend both occupancy and the average rate. So what we have seen in the last year is around 82% growth in the RevPAR, and that's very smart. And the best part about that growth that we saw last year was that it came from both average rates as well as occupancy. And that's very healthy for the hospitality industry. That gives you a lot of assurance that the sector is very strong, and the sector will deliver much better results as we continue to stabilize and as we continue to grow. And a little bit of snapshot on where we are with the branded inventory. So we have got around 165,000 keys as we speak. There are 57 brands operating, and we've got 187 sub brands that we operate with in India as we speak. So, in terms of how the shift has happened. So if you remember, pre-COVID, the hospitality industry was focused mainly on tier 1 cities, business oriented. There was leisure, but it wasn't much. But now if you see, there has been a complete paradigm shift. If you see on your left is the cities that were ruling the rates in 2019, which is pre-COVID. So if you see, it had a very healthy mix of leisure and business. So if you go through the list, Udaipur being a leisure destination, and then Mumbai was a business destination. So the top spot was by a leisure destination. The second was, of course, with a business destination. Goa, Shimla is again leisure destinations, and then New Delhi was Goa, Shimla is a leisure destination, and then New Delhi was a business destination. So there was a very good mix between leisure and business. But the moment you see post-COVID how things have changed, there's been a lot of traction for the leisure areas, the leisure regions. And if you see the performance in 2022, you would only see New Delhi and Mumbai, and to an extent Chandigarh, which can be considered relatively a business destination. And all the others on the list are primarily for a leisure destination. Now, what does that translate into in terms of financials? Generally, this indicates that people are spending more on their travel for leisure, which is actually a very healthy sign. And that's why I said initially that the Indian traveler has come of age. The Indian traveler has started traveling. From being just tourists, or from being just people just traveling for the sake of traveling, we have actually found a reason to travel, and that's what has been picked up. So the potential that is unleashing because of this change is just immense. And the moment we go from tier 1 to tier 2 cities, financially, how does it impact us? One, the cost of land, the cost of construction, the cost of rentals, in case you want to run on a rental basis, all those expenses would be lower in these cities as compared to what you would probably pay in cities like Mumbai, Delhi, or Gurgaon. Now, at the same time, the cost of payroll, like I said, that the most important expense or the highest contributor of expense for hospitality is payroll. The moment you go into these tier 2, tier 3 cities, your overall costs for payroll also come down, because generally the salary scales for these sectors or these regions is much lower than what you have in the tier 1 cities. So that is also helping the properties to get better profitability out of their assets. And of course, the localization helps. The sourcing of items from within the vicinity also helps, because all those things would also cost you lesser. But obviously, it also comes with a flip side, that the availability of resources, both in terms of physical resources as well as human resources, is limited in these cities. So you tend to end up getting people from outside to work in these cities. So that also impacts your cost. But overall, it's a very healthy sign for Indian hospitality industry. Now, this is how we have performed. These are the prime chains that we have, which are listed on the stock exchanges in India. And this gives you a very interesting outlook of what the Indian hospitality industry has gone through since COVID. So this is a comparison between the 9 months of financial year 2023 as compared to the 9 months of financial year 2020. We have removed the last 3 months of the financial year 2020 to remove the impact of COVID on the hospitality sector. Now, very interesting, if you see each one of them, not even one exception, the growth that you saw in revenue for each of these companies is much lower than the growth that you saw in the EBITDA. EBITDA is your earning before interest, tax, and depreciation. So this is like a kind of a profit for that you generate from the asset. I'm not considering profit after tax, which is the third section, because profit after tax has been influenced by the losses that these companies incurred during COVID and while they were ramping up. So let's focus on the revenue and the EBITDA part first. So if you see, for each of these entities, while the revenues grew somewhere between 5 to 10 to 20% max, the profit that they saw an increase in was well above 60-70%. And the reason why that happened was because after COVID, every hotel has rationalized their payroll costs. And I keep harping on this point that for hospitality, the biggest expense is payroll. The moment you've got payroll under control, your profitability is bound to improve. And what happened after COVID, we looked at things from a completely different angle. So earlier, hospitality, especially luxury hospitality or premium hospitality, meant that you had to have people for everything. You walk into a hotel or you drive into a hotel, you've got somebody who would open the door of your car. You walk up the stairs, you've got somebody who would open the door for you. You get into the security scan, there is somebody holding a tray for you to place your mobile in. There's somebody who's looking at the x-ray. There's so many people that we involved from the time you enter into a hotel to actually the time that you actually go to your room. There would be somebody who would escort you to the room, then would have enough time to explain the room also to you, that what are the features of the room. Not anymore. It has drastically been rationalized. I won't say it has been reduced. It has been rationalized to see that whether we want all those people at these things, or we can do it in a better and a more efficient way. And what has that translated into is the result that you see, that while the revenues are growing gradually, the profitability has really shot up over the last few months post the COVID. This is another important thing, and this is since I said that I've worked in regions outside of India as well. This is typical of India, where the domestic brands that you see are so strong, which is not the case with a lot of countries. Even when I talk about, like, I was in Thailand, and Thailand is known for hospitality. When you start counting the number of hospitality chains which have been developed within Thailand, or local domestic chains, it's not there. But the moment you get into India, we've got so many of them. And the best part is that the Indian chains are actually doing much better than many of the international chains in terms of adding the number of keys, adding the number of properties. So that just goes to show that Indian hospitality is in itself is very strong. And obviously, the other chains are also riding on this strong growth prospects, but we domestically are also equally strong. Then when you talk about the change in the paradigm shift that we are seeing, the changes that we are seeing in what people look at, there are so many unicorns, there are so many startups, there are so many fresh ideas which are coming in. And I talked about Oyo, and I mean, currently the company that I work for, we have also recently started off our operations. It's been a few years since we started off. But when you see the Indian scenario, you really feel that, if you have a fresh idea, like Oyo was an idea that was converted into a business. And the moment it was converted into a business, it had, you saw the valuations. Obviously, there has been a debate about the valuation, but this is what was available probably around 6-7 months back when they filed the documents. The valuation was around $10 billion. That's debatable, but then still, when you see how a small idea can be converted into a business, and you really don't need a lot of money to convert those ideas. Looking at the international arena, you've got Airbnb. Airbnb's valuation right now is around 80 billion US dollars. And what is Airbnb? It doesn't own any asset. When you think about the capital investment that they've done, they've actually invested in technology. They've actually invested in the idea. They've actually invested in the marketing. They've actually invested in their service rather than investing in physical assets. And right now, as we speak, like I said, that the valuation sits at 80 billion US dollars. So what we really need right now is an idea. There are people who want to invest in physical assets. The physical assets, especially for us, is always very dear. We still want to invest in something which is physical so that we can see. But actually, if you see, things have changed. And there are a lot of people coming up with innovative ideas. Saffron Stays started off with just one single property of a, kind of an upscale homestay. But right now, as we speak, it has already accumulated more than 200 properties. So that's the potential growth that you see in this industry right now. And the key, and that's very important, this is how the investment scenario is changing in hospitality, that more and more companies are actually going asset light. We had, back then when I started off my career with hospitality, one model that really was prevalent in the country was that you own a hotel and you operate a hotel, or you own a hotel and you let somebody else operate the hotel. But right now, there are a lot of companies that do not want to own a hotel; they just want to operate it, and that's the key to the future. And the reason why staying asset light is the key to the future is that obviously you tend to block much lesser capital of yours. Generally, if you have to invest in a hotel, you really need a lot of money to invest in a hotel. But if you have to operate a hotel, it's a skill. It's your service that you need to develop. It's not easy, of course. It takes time. But then if you have a concept like that, you can really cash in on it. Much better return on capital because of low investment. Your returns, obviously, when you start off, you will have to keep investing. You might not turn black in the first year, but then gradually, the moment you start turning black, the growth that you see in your profitability will be much faster as compared to if you invest in a hotel, physical asset, and then start generating funds. There's always a cap, but the moment you're investing in an idea like this, you would generally tend to multiply your returns much faster. It gives you enhanced negotiation because of the scale that you operate at. Scalability is another thing. The moment you invest in technology and you've got an idea that, like for example, Oyo, as we speak, I keep talking about Oyo. Imagine the scalability it had, and the same goes with Airbnb. Why has it got to 80 billion valuation? Because it can be scalable. You don't need even a house, a full house to be given to Airbnb. What you can do is you can give one room of your own house. If you're living in a 3-bedroom, you can probably rent out 1 bedroom to Airbnb. You don't need to give the entire 3-bedroom. So imagine the potential that it has. And it obviously has much lesser business risk because you're not heavily invested, and healthier margins. So this is about why it's important to stay light in the current scenario. And this is what I spoke about, that the Indian traveler, not tourist, has changed. So you see these experiential stays. This is what has become the part of Indian traveler right now. The photograph that you see on the left is actually Chadar track. I'm not sure if the entire audience would know about Chadar track. So this is something that happens in Ladakh. First time I traveled in Ladakh was in 2010, and when I was speaking to the driver who was driving us around, he said during winters they generally go to the plains because it gets very cold. So which means no employment, no business, nothing there. Now, as we speak, this Chadar track happens during January and February, and because of this, there are a lot of hotels that get big amount of business, and this is just because people are willing to experience that track which happens on a frozen river, where you actually are in temperatures that range between -25 to -35 degrees. That's where the travel industry has reached. So imagine the potential that we have as we go forward, right? And what has it impacted financially? It generates a constant demand. Like I said, that during lean season also, if you have experience that you're offering, people would travel to you. It improves your margins because you're bundling services together. You're not just selling a hotel, you're not just selling a restaurant, you're actually bundling services together. So it improves your margins as well. It expands your target audience, especially in the current world that we live in, where Instagram, Facebook, Reels, all of that has become so important. There are people who would just want to go there to probably have content for their social media handles. And obviously capital investment is low because it's more of a service. So you need to invest lower amount in your capital. And then you also enhance your length of stay. This is very important for operations. The more length of stay that you generate out of your guests, the lesser would be the cost of running the operations. So that also helps the moment you're adding experiences to your stay. And on a flip side, it adds operational risk, and it might cost the insurances dearly. So it might increase your cost of insurance. And just to give you a perspective of how much the Indian traveler has the propensity to spend. So Maldives, I took the example of Maldives. So Maldives is the fifth highest ADR in the world. It ranks fifth highest globally in terms of the average rate that they charge. And generally it ranges between $500 to $600 per night, which is like in Indian rupees, you're talking about easily around 40 to 50,000 rupees per night. And you'll be surprised, Indians were the number one source market for Maldives for many years post-COVID. It's only recently that we have actually moved to the second spot. And if you look at the gap between us and Russia, there's hardly around 60, 65, visitors gap. So we're still almost number one, and we've been number one. So that just gives you the potential that how much can an Indian traveler actually spend on an experience. And here you see some of the experiences, some of the experiential stays that you have. And the moment you add experience, you would see that, you get that opportunity of adding a lot of premium to your rate. These are resorts which are in the southern part of India. Evolve back, they've got resorts in Kabini, Kurg, Hampi. So they add experiences to your stay, but look at the amount that they can charge by adding those experiences, around $300 to $400. This is another Shakti. This is a venture which is in Ladakh. It's also in the Northeast. They add a lot of experience. They bring a lot of localized experiences into what they offer along with the stay. And look at what they can charge by adding those experiences. They provide you with the local food, local culture, a lot of those things. And what they can do by that is that they can actually charge a heavy premium on their stay options. So these are the major things that are pushing the Indian hospitality ahead right now. We are very lucky that we have a very stable political situation in the country, especially looking at what's happening around the world. The young generation is taking lead right now. Social media is becoming a rage. People travel, for the sake of getting the content for their social media. That's also pushing the demand. And government is always very supportive of hospitality because of the employment generation potential that it has. And Indian hospitality has got something for everyone. You talk about beaches, you talk about adventure sports, you talk about food, you talk about city, you talk about heritage. We've got anything to everything that anybody wants. Anybody traveling to India will find a spot where whatever they need to go skiing, they can probably go to Oli. They want to paraglide. Beer Billing in Himachal is one of the best spots to paraglide. So there are so many avenues that we have in Indian hospitality. But obviously there are also headwinds that we have, which are restricting the growth of the industry. There is supply that is constantly coming, pricing pressure. Indian, while there are Indians who spend, but then there are Indians who would also be very cautious about what they're spending on. So that puts a bit of a pricing pressure on the industry. Real estate has become super expensive. Right talent, because of the scale with which we have expanded, the right talent, the percentage of right talent has also dropped drastically. And then the licensing requirements, especially in hospitality, are huge. Safety concerns and then travel cost. So this is a bit of an outlook on the Indian hospitality, how the future looks like. So the target that India has for 2028 is 512 billion coming in from tourism. And if you all recall, we have a target of around 5 trillion in GDP for our economy. So practically what we want is at least 10% of that GDP needs to come from tourism. That's the steep target that we have. Very much achievable, looking at the captive audience that we have in the country, looking at the growth that we have seen, looking at the recovery that we have seen in the industry. It's very much possible to really achieve those numbers. And I'm sure that we all will tag along, being part of this industry in this growth story. And lastly, how can we be part of this growth story that's there? So one of the options that you have is to invest in hotel stocks. There are a lot of hotel companies which are listed on the stock exchange, so you can actually pick up their stocks. Whether this is the right time to invest, or whether this is not the right time to invest, that's something that probably the experts can suggest. But investing in hotel stocks is the easiest way for you to get a flavor of getting into the industry and being part of this growth story. The other one is to invest in ancillary businesses. There are a lot of businesses that support hospitality. You can get involved in those businesses, and that will be one way of getting into this growth story and being a part of it. Or the other option that you have is, this is the simplest one. Like I said, that if you have a 3-bedroom house, if you want to get into hospitality, the easiest thing is probably rent out one room out of that if you're not using it. Or if you have a classic concept, or if you have something, a house back home which overlooks a valley, very beautiful, what you can actually do is you can actually give it on Airbnb, or you can probably give it to talk to one of those new startups that we have that can actually take it and sell it for you. Direct investment in hotel asset, if you have that much amount of capital with you, you can actually invest in a hotel. And like I said, that you don't need to look at a 40-50 room hotel. What you can do is you can probably start off with a small one and then grow from there. And then part of a pooled investment, where a few like-minded people get together and they invest and they create an asset, and then they operate, or either let somebody else operate. And lastly, timeshare. Timeshare will be where you own an asset in a complex, and then you have an option of taking that, using it for yourself for a few number of days in a year, and for the others they can actually rent it out, sell it out. It can be sold as a hotel. This can be part of a hotel or a community. So that's briefly about where we are in the Indian hospitality, and what are the different financial aspects of the industry.
Thank you so much, sir. And in a short span of time, you have given the entire glimpses of hospitality industry and the finance associated to that. And at the end, you have given us certain tips also. So thank you so much for that. And if you allow, quickly, I would like to take few questions to understand more.
Absolutely.
Ji. So initially, from the presentation itself, few things I would like to understand, and then we'll move on to the questions. So during the slides, you have talked about, in the one slide, you have talked about adding the keys. So that means adding the rooms or expanding the hotel occupancy. Is that what it means?
So it can be in two aspects. One is if you expand an existing asset. So let us say that you've got a 100-room property, right, and you extend it by another 50, and now your total number of keys is 150. So those will be 50 additional keys. But at the same time, you also have new assets coming up, new hotels coming up. So they are also an addition to the key. So it's actually a combination of both, but majorly it would be fresh supply that will come into the market. Right. Thank you for that.
And also, you have mentioned about a new way wherein you don't own the hotel, but you operate the hotel. So
Exactly.
this can. So can you give some examples to our audience? Some examples who are only operating, not owning.
Yeah. So the all the big chains that you see, especially the international chains that you see, the Marriotts of the world, the Hiltons of the world, they don't
Mm-hmm.
own an asset. I mean, they do own a few of the assets, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't own most of their assets. What they do is there is an owner who constructs a hotel, gets
Mm-hmm.
into something that we call as a management agreement. You get
Mm-hmm.
into that management agreement, hand it over to these chains, and then they operate for you. Even
Okay.
in the Indian scenario, there are a lot of chains which have now started venturing into management rather than owning. And to add the latest trend that we are seeing, even these management companies, which
Mm-hmm.
primarily focused only on management, are also becoming further asset light. What they are doing is that instead of managing, they're also looking at franchise options. So where they would just lend their brand name and the marketing platform and the reservation platform, and then they would not be operating the hotel. The hotel will be operated by the owner, but they would give their brand name, or it would be operated by a white label operator, which is a third party completely, neither the hotel chain nor the owner, and a completely different entity that is involved in operations, but they would not have their brand name. So everybody is trying to become asset light right now.
Okay. So, in order to understand as a layman, this management, contracting, and franchising, these are two different things, sir.
Yes. So in management, there is an active involvement of the management company in the day-to-day operations of the hotel, right?
Right.
So if let us say that you own a hotel and you bring in, let us say Marriott, to manage your hotel. So
Mm-hmm.
the entire day-to-day operations will be run by Marriott for that
Mm-hmm.
hotel. You won't be
Okay.
involved. I mean, obviously you'll be, you'll have strategic discussions with the operator, but day-to-day operations will be run by uh, Marriott. But
Right.
contrary to that, if it's a franchise, the owner would either himself run the operations or he would engage a third party who would run the operation, but the hotel will be labeled or branded with one of these chains that you operate with. That's a franchise agreement where the only understanding or the only arrangement that you have is to use the brand name of these chains or
Right.
the operator.
Right. Got it. Got it. Thank you, sir. Another question is, nowadays we are seeing that a major chunk or a major part of the hotel financing, the revenue comes from events, banquets, and MICE industry. So, as you have given ample amount of examples within India and abroad also, if you want to discuss, so how this particular industry, MICE industry, is helping in gaining more financial, more revenue aspect for the industry, specifically post-COVID.
Yeah. So I think that part is recovering very well. Obviously,
Mhm.
we had a major issue or a major impact on the events part of business that was there pre-COVID,
Mhm.
because of the restrictions that we had, and then because of the culture of organizing digital meetings or e-meetings, or online meetings that took over. But slowly people have started realizing that it is good, but it's not as productive. And at the end of the day, you still need to meet, have an in-person discussion. So it's recovering well. And I sit out of India, right? I mean, I've been in Thailand, I've been in Qatar, and I've been in Dubai now. One
Yeah.
thing that everybody talks about outside of India in hospitality is the Indian destination weddings. It's one of the
Yeah.
biggest things that everybody talks about. When I was in Thailand, when I was in Qatar, and when I'm in Dubai, that's one thing that everybody talks about. So that's the potential that you have. And a lot of that business, what we have seen lately, has actually got retained within India, especially post COVID. And that's what is really pushing the revenues up. That this change that has happened, where we have started exploring our own areas or our own cities, instead of always venturing out whenever we looked at a destination wedding, or we looked at organizing events. So that has really helped, and that is lifting the overall MICE business up for hotels. Otherwise, primarily hotels were focused on rooms revenue, obviously
Mm,
because it also yields the maximum. When you look
ji.
at the profitability, rooms would generally yield a much higher return as compared to food and beverage. But generally, when you are having MICE events, it gets
Mhm.
bundled with rooms. So it's a win-win for us. So this has really been doing well, and I see a lot of potential with MICE as we go forward.
Right, right. Thank you for answering that. Another question is what are, as per your opinion, what are the key challenges that hospitality business face when managing their finances, and how can they be overcome?
Yeah, the biggest issue that any hospitality or hotel company faces, or any hotel faces, I'll talk about hotel, let me talk about at the micro level, is the fixed cost. So that's the biggest challenge that we have, and that was one of the reasons why the industry suffered so much during COVID, because the biggest expense for a hotel is payroll. And payroll, as we know, is fixed in nature. Obviously you can have some portion of your payroll as a flexible component, where you have buyouts, you have casuals, you have contracted labor, but majority of your payroll is actually fixed, and that actually accounts for the highest amount of your cost percentage. And that's where the industry is struggling, that that component. And there are a lot of sectors, there are a lot of areas which are seasonal, especially for those, even the tier one cities, they also operate on seasons. The demand does slow down during the summer months. So when it slows down, the propensity for you to really reduce your expenses is is very low. So, and that's the biggest concern that we have. And the other concern that we have is that it's got a very high investment and a moderate return. It doesn't have a high return in terms of what you generate from a hotel property. But like I said, that return on investment is not the only thing that you look at when you invest in a hotel. For an owner, obviously the capital appreciation of his asset is also one of the major factors. So besides, but that's typical of the Indian real estate, that even when you buy a house, the amount of rentals that you get out of your house, even if you buy it in a premium spot, wherever you buy it, the amount of rental that you will generate from your asset as a percentage to your total investment would always be very low. But what you invest, what you intend when you invest in those assets is the capital appreciation. And the same goes with hospitality, that the returns are low, they're not very high. If you manage it well, of course, you can have smart returns on your asset. But then with the amount of investment, your returns would generally be moderate. So that's the other thing that we have. So especially if you have to get it financed, the amount of interest, for you to compensate that from the profit that you're generating, it at times becomes a little bit of a challenge.
I'm really sorry. Due to some technical issue, I have to just close my mic. Okay, one last question to ask you, sir. If you can share some tips or advice for individual interested in pursuing a career in hospitality finance or financial management within the hospitality sector.
Okay, so you know first let me split this question into two parts. One is the career in finance for finance professionals, right? This
Right.
is a
Right.
yeah this hospitality, as I consider, is a super specialization. And how you can vouch for that is that when we hire in hospitality, the moment you're getting into a mid management level, we generally, and when I say generally, I mean almost 99% of the times, we would not look at people from outside the industry, because you're so much specialized. It needs so much of specialization that the moment you've reached a particular level, you would not want people from other industry to be hired, because they will not have the domain knowledge. That's true for most of the industry, but what I've seen in hospitality is that it's very, very typical of this industry, where the percentage is very high, where you really don't look at resources from outside your industry. So you can actually start off your career. And the beauty about this industry, and that's something that attracted me 15 years back, and that still keeps me going, is that there's so much to learn from this industry. If you're working in an industry, if you're working in a in a production facility, that's one thing that you can learn. If you're working in a service industry, that's one thing that you can learn. If you're working in a retail, that's one thing that you can learn. But the moment you get into hotels, you're learning everything, because there's production happening, right? When you go to the kitchen, there's production happening. So you have to factor in, the food costs that you consider, the beverage cost that you consider. There is a cost factor that you have to consider, which, kind of, when you put your hat of understanding how the production happens. When you go to front office, you have the service industry there. When you go to the retail shops, you have the retail industry there. So you really have to think a lot. And especially for finance professionals, you're looking at core accounting, you're looking at auditing, you're looking at controls. Controls play a very major role in hospitality. And you have to put your auditor hat on to set up the controls and make sure that the controls are working the way they're supposed to work. And then taxes. Taxes is another thing that you want to understand. And hospitality is complex. Fortunately, now with GST, it has simplified drastically. But otherwise, if we go back, probably the pre-GST implementation, hospitality had one of the worst tax format that we had in the country. Now, the second part of the question, what I would, the angle is for the operations. So we have a lot of people from operations who want to move into hospitality finance. Mm-hmm. And what I've observed in the past 15 years, and I've been active in hiring for the past 10 years almost. In fact, last year when I was in Doha, we had 5 new hotels to open. I had total 8 hotels with me. And I had to hire a team of around 70 in finance. And when I ran out of people from finance fraternity, I started looking at people from operations. And trust me, getting somebody from operations gives you a completely new outlook, because they are there on the shop floor. They understand how things work. And the only thing that they're missing is probably a bit of a financial understanding, which can be imparted by training. And I have seen a lot of people who have actually progressed to the positions of director of finance or even beyond, but started off their career in operations. So you have an option, you have an opportunity here, because you have the domain knowledge. One of the profiles that we have in hospitality or in hotel finance is food and beverage cost controller. There are a lot of people from F&B service who would venture into that because they know how to operate. What they really have to do is put numbers to it. So it's easier for them. And we've really seen a lot of interest from non-finance people to get into finance, because the potential is actually, very, very high for finance. And like I said, that it's a super specialization. So the moment you're getting into this and you're giving your heart and soul into it, sky's the limit for you to progress.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your views, and thank you for giving guidance to the young ones.
It's been a pleasure. I'm really happy that I could share my knowledge and experience with everybody. And it was really a pleasure being here.
And we are hopeful that in future we will be going to see your group coming to India as a hospitality unit.
Absolutely, we have plans of venturing into India very soon. So for sure, you'll see us somewhere in one of the Indian cities.
Sure. Thank you.